The Poppy Playtime protagonist is actually dead, and it all started back in Chapter 3. What's up guys, welcome back to Sam's Fun. My name is Sam and today we're taking a full tour through the Playtime factory to uncover why everything is doomed to end in absolute destruction. If you've been paying attention, this nameless, faceless, yellow-suited man in control, who I'm just gonna call them the protagonist from now on, has had death trailing his every step since Chapter 1. Huggy Wuggy, Mommy Long Legs, PJ Pocket Player, CatNap, Miss Light, Maxibu, Yarnami, Baba Chops, Pianosaurus, Justice for Pianosaurus, Dewey, Harley Sawyer, Lily of Brace, and the prototype. Every single one of them wanted to make a quick meal out of our protagonist. As you know, ever since the Hour of Joy 10 years ago, they've devoured every single unfortunate human trapped in this factory. Now they're so starving that they either resort to eating each other or view the protagonist as a running shish kebab. Yet despite everything, none of them could defeat or kill our protagonist. At least not until Chapter 5. No, I'm not talking about the prototype shoving its metallic claws through the protagonist's body. In reality, what's actually killing the protagonist is something far simple than you think. What's killing them, it's chlorine gas. Yeah, I know it sounds like a completely insane theory, but hear me out. At the beginning of Chapter 5, right when we're escaping from Huggy Wuggy, or at least what's left of him, we reach the engineering section. But before we can enter, we have to go through a decontamination process. What does that mean? It means we're about to enter a hazardous or isolated zone. And to ensure we don't bring any germs into or out of that area, we have to go through a specialized shower, a decontamination chamber. If you look closely, we see hazmat suits scattered all across various sections of Chapter 5. Or we see people wearing them in the VHS tapes. So does that mean the environment of Chapter 5 is contaminated and our protagonist has caught some weird disease and is dying? No, I don't think so. If this environment were entirely contaminated, I don't think the toys could have survived here for 10 years and they all would have died. So what is actually killing the protagonist? It's the decontamination process itself. Let me explain why. Decontamination is a highly sensitive process. When you're wearing a specialized suit, you step into a specific shower to wash the suit down. The specific chemical used in this disinfection process is completely harmless as long as you're wearing a protective hazmat suit. Otherwise, the substance is incredibly hazardous to humans. So what is this substance? Well, in medicine, various agents are used for decontamination, ranging from simple soap and water to much stronger and more lethal chemicals. Given the sensitivity of the internal environments in this chapter, I believe the substance we are dealing with is sodium hypochlorite. That's right, the exact chemical used in household bleach. The substance is typically diluted at a 1 to 10 ratio with water, but even then, repeated exposure can cause massive harm to a human body. Severe dermatitis, mild chemical burns, hair loss and mucosal damage, system poisoning, and most importantly, severe lung damage. And lung damage is exactly what I believe is happening to the protagonist. Without wearing a protective suit, the protagonist encountered this chemical roughly 7 to 8 times throughout this chapter. By inhaling the substance, which is essentially chlorine vapor, it damages the lungs and ultimately leads to pulmonary edema. What does that mean? Think the lungs like sponges. Their tinier sacs needs to be filled with air so oxygen can reach the blood, allowing your cells to function. But when the lungs fill with fluid, breathing becomes incredibly difficult and blood oxygen levels crash hard. Even if the person is still breathing, the oxygen isn't getting delivered, which can be fatal. Of course, this isn't the first time the protagonist has suffered lung damage. He actually been carrying this issue since Chapter 3. Remember, Chapter 3 introduced a new substance called Aeternum Somnium, widely known as the red smoke. It was introduced under the pretense of calming children down and putting them to sleep. But the further we progress in that chapter, the more we realize how terrifyingly dangerous it is.
It was at this moment that he knew. He fucked up.
But what people don't mention enough is the damage it does to the lungs. Come on guys, a hazardous substance that induces bizarre hallucinations, knocks people unconscious, kills them, and happens to be highly flammable. How can we not assume it treats your lungs? Both in Chapter 3 and Chapter 4, the protagonist was heavily exposed to this gas, undoubtedly causing severe lung and brain damage. Now, what makes this even more fascinating is what happens to the protagonist at the end of the chapter. The prototype prototype wounds them, most likely puncturing the lungs, and then throws them into a barrel filled with poppy gel. Yeah, I know you might think this poppy gel ultimately saved them despite all that lung damage, but no, I think this poppy gel wasn't a blessing for the protagonist at all. It was an absolute curse. In chapter 5, when poppy gel is introduced, it's revealed as the substance Elliot Ludwig used to create the prototype and Poppy. It was designed to stimulate cell generation and revive dead organisms. With this miracle, Elliot managed to bring his deceased daughter back to life. But after he was killed by Ali, who is actually the prototype, the original formula for this substance was lost. Playtime scientists did everything they could to decode and recreate it, eventually developing the growth medium. This highly unstable substance caused cell generation to go into overdrive, continuing endlessly until the subject ultimately died from excruciating pain. Because of this, they created an inhabitant agent called the Negation Compound. In fact, finding this compound was the protagonist's main goal in this chapter. Since the prototype's core structure is built on poppy gel, backed by Giblet's dialogue mentioning the prototype used massive amounts of poppy gel to fuse other toy parts to itself, the Negation Compound would be completely lethal to the prototype. Now let's head back to the protagonist. When the prototype drops Stay into the barrel, a catastrophic chain reaction occurs. Heart rate spike. The body goes into shock as it detects catastrophic organ failure, plus rapid regenerative stress simultaneously. Breathing becomes difficult and impossible. The lungs are being regenerated while the body needs oxygen right now. The regeneration process itself obstructs breathing. A scar tissue being rebuilt creates swelling and fluid. Heart stops. Cardiac arrest from hypoxia plus system shock from conflicting processes. Eyes turn black. Neural shutdown, death state. When Giblet revives us with his special staff, it doesn't mean a complete rescue. It just means he bought the protagonist some extra time. We can't accurately predict the full extent of this poppy gel revival powers because, as you know, this version is vastly different from what Ludwig originally created. So we can't say with absolute certainty that the poppy gel completely saved the protagonist from permanent death. Sure, it healed the wound the prototype gave them, stopped the bleeding, and prevented immediate death. But we still can't confidently say whether it repaired the prior damage done to his brain and lungs. Despite all of this, I believe the poppy gel has only guaranteed a slower, far more painful death. This is backed up by a file we find in this chapter, which explicitly details the devastating effects that occur when a human is exposed to poppy gel without protective gear. Looking at the symptoms listed, the protagonist has only one remaining reason to keep going down this path: finding the Negation Compound to destroy the prototype once and for all. What do you think? With everything that has gone down between the protagonist and Dr. Sawyer, can these two actually work together to destroy the prototype? Is the next chapter going to be the grand final of Poppy Playtime, or is Mob Entertainment going to keep milking this cash cow? Let me know in the comments. Smash that like button and subscribe to Sam Spawn for more theories. Catch you in the next one.